entomologist with Department of Agriculture, and I'm going to talk to you about spotted lanternfly and hopefully not freak you out too much with this new pest on our horizon. So my title says a threat to North Carolina agriculture, but to be quite honest, this is going to be a problem, and already is a problem in some of the northern states with tourism, with businesses, industry. It's a much wider thing than just agriculture, although for us that is obviously a very large focus. So as Charlotte mentioned, this is a pest that is not here in North Carolina yet, but this is a matter of when it arrives as opposed to if, unfortunately. So we want to get as many people educated as possible before it gets here so that we can hopefully tackle it and do spot eradications when it does show up. So let's see. There we go. So what is spotted lanternfly? It is a plant hopper. It's a member of the family Fulgoridae, and it's one of the only pests in this family that's actually known, or only insects in the family known to be a pest. A few months back, actually back in February, we had the chance to attend a spotted lanternfly summit in Charlotte, North Carolina that had industry professionals, people from Penn State Extension, Pennsylvania Department of Ag, and Penn State researchers. And so the following quote really stuck out with me, and I always like to lead with it. Spotted lanternfly is a freak among plant hoppers. And the more we learn about this pest, the more we come to realize this is very true. It's been difficult to study. Every time we think we understand it, it does something different. But we're going to do what we can to hopefully control and slow the spread of this pest. So spotted lanternfly is native to parts of Asia, northern China, Vietnam, Bangladesh. In 2004, it was introduced into Korea, and it has become a major pest there, specifically on grapes. It's already spread throughout pretty much the entire country. It was first detected in the United States and Pennsylvania in 2014, and I'll go into a little more detail further in about how that detection happened, where we think it came from originally. Spotted lanternfly is univoltine, which means it only has one generation per year. This is true up in the northern states. We suspect it will remain true here if it gets to North Carolina, but again, we won't really know till it gets here if that holds true. And one of the really key characteristics of spotted lanternfly and why it is such a problem is because it has a very broad host range, and I will definitely dive more into that further into the presentation. So let's start with a life cycle. This is kind of key to understanding when it's best to control and look out for this pest. So as I said, one generation per year. They overwinter in the egg stage. And so you'll see here on the right side are images of an unhatched and then hatched egg masses. So that top image is probably a pretty freshly laid egg mass. They measure about 1 inch long. And in the field, most people describe it as kind of looking like a smear of mud or silly putty that's been stuck to a surface. And with that top picture, you can actually see some of the actual eggs emerging that didn't get covered by the gooey mass, for lack of a better term right now. That lower picture is a hatched egg mass, and each egg or each adult lays roughly 35 eggs per mass, and they can lay a lot of eggs, and it can get out of control pretty quickly. So all of these dates you see on this life cycle here are based on Pennsylvania. We imagine that we would be running roughly 30 days ahead of Pennsylvania based on the phenology charts that USDA has provided to us. So you can kind of shift all of these up by roughly a month for each. But the eggs in Pennsylvania, you usually see between October to June. We actually just got back from a trip to Pennsylvania to see this, and we didn't see any of the freshly egg masses, obviously, because they would have already hatched, but we saw a ton of those hatched egg masses, and it's pretty alarming. So I also want to include this picture. Many of you may be familiar with gypsy moth. We have been really working hard over many, many years to keep it out of our state, but we get little bits each year that float in, and we do treating. Spotted lanternfly lays its eggs in a very similar fashion to gypsy moth, despite being incredibly different insects. They both lay these egg masses on smooth surfaces, and in this picture you can see an adult right here who has probably just laid her eggs and right on top of a gypsy moth egg mass. So just to give you an idea of how similarly the egg masses are, and they can be very, very difficult to spot. So the instars, they do have 4 distinct instar stages or nymph stages. The first through third are these small black. This one I have not gotten to see yet, but most people say it resembles a tick in size and appearance, but when you were to go, if you were to try to touch it, it would hop away. It's indicating it is a plant hopper. They will have these kind of white polka dots, but these first 3 stages, nymphal stages, are generally pretty difficult to see. And so it's this 4th instar that would become very obvious. This one is about half an inch in length. They develop wing buds, that bright red appearance. Again, they have the white polka dots. Here's a couple of better images of those instars. We were able to see some of the first through third on our trip to Pennsylvania, but we had to have PDA staff point them out to us. But that 4th instar, if and when it gets here, will begin to be the really obvious one. So let's pretend it was already here. Probably in the next week or so, you would expect to start seeing that stage. So the adults are the most kind of charismatic, gorgeous stage, and would definitely be the easiest to spot if it were here. We would expect to see these probably beginning in late July. Normally, you would see them with their wings at rest, and so that's this top image here. They do have the bright kind of pinkish color, polka dots, the hash thing. They're about an inch in length. And then the adults, they are very poor flyers, but they can fly. And so occasionally you will see them in this form. And some people, when they see them, they think they're seeing butterflies. Very understandable. But they are hoppers. So they prefer to climb up the trees. And the flying activity is pretty rare to see. Mostly you only see that kind of in late August, right around the time they would begin laying their eggs. So why are we actually concerned about this pest? What's the big deal about it? Well, I mentioned earlier the host list being pretty broad, and here's an example of the kinds of plants that are affected by this. You've got apples, cherry, grapes, maple, stone fruits, walnuts. It's a huge list, and those are just the trees. So far, over 70 species of woody plants have been identified as hosts of spotted lanternfly. And it's as broad as poison ivy, oriental bittersweet, Virginia creeper. So far, it seems like if it basically produces good turgor pressure at any point in its life cycle, spotted lanternfly will be attracted to it. So here's a few pictures to show what damage you might see if and when this pest gets here. This one on the far left just shows sap kind of seeping down the tree. They are piercing, sucking insects. And so you'll start seeing weeping wounds on trees. Here's more examples of that, and as well as sooty mold forming. So between the sap and producing honeydew, sooty mold is a really key characteristic of presence of this pest. And then this third picture on the right is showing fungal mats that have begun appearing at the base of an infested tree. And not only are they just awful to look at, they are killing understory growth, so really affecting the environment of the plants. And in addition, the spotted lanternfly produce honeydew, as many of these insects do, but they produce so much honeydew that in areas of high infestation, it can be a perfectly sunny day and you'll be outside and you will think it is raining down on you, and it is just the honeydew. People don't want to go outside in Pennsylvania in the summertime and enjoy their decks if they have an infestation of this pest around their homes. It's pretty atrocious. And I haven't had that personal experience yet, but just the descriptions alone, one person described being under an infested tree and feeling like he had hair gel through his hair, and it was literally just the honeydew building up from all of these insects amassing and feeding. So here's a few more pictures to kind of show the scope that we're talking about. Again, these are all photos from Pennsylvania. The one on the far left is on a birch tree, and you can see just the sheer number of egg masses on one tree alone. And if you remember, each egg mass has roughly 35 eggs. You can start to do the math and realize how quickly this pest can explode out of control. The middle picture is that bright, bold 4th instar on Tree of Heaven, which I'm going to go into more why Tree of Heaven has been mentioned by Charlotte as a key concern for us. And then that third picture on the right is the really drastic one. This is a tree in a homeowner's yard, and other than just the sheer amount of adults that are on this one single tree, you can also see here at the bottom, this is an ant mound, and surely these ants have been attracted simply because of the amount of honeydew. So one of the key side effects of this pest, in addition to reducing home values because of black city mold growing and the honeydew dropping on people, is the sheer amount of sugar water is basically attracting a ton of stinging insects. And so people unfortunately are being stung by ants, by wasps, bees, simply because they're being attracted by all the honeydew and sap being produced between the insects and the trees. So let me see if I can get these videos to work. They don't always cooperate, hopefully. So I have 3 videos. I won't play the entire lengths of them, but these are from Pennsylvania, or Penn State Entomology's website. There's only 3 videos on their channel, but they really show off the amount of honeydew, at least this one does. So this is on grape, and if you can see my mouse, this insect that I'm circling here on the left, in a couple of seconds is going to start shooting that honeydew out. So there it goes. So if you imagine each one of these starting to do that, you can kind of get an idea of just how gross and unpleasant the presence of this insect can be. So let me go to the next video. So this one is a spotted lanternfly in an apple orchard, again in Pennsylvania. And I'm just showing these to give an example of just how thick and heavy this infestation can be when spotted lanternfly is around. And you can actually see a few of them flying. And at the very end of this, you'll see, yep, one crawl into the video. And then this last one is another short one. Again, it's that same apple orchard. And I just want to show this to highlight that swarming behavior, which is pretty bizarre for plant hoppers, or at least Fulgorids. So this, again, this is August in Pennsylvania. And this is just when the infestation gets so intense. There's so many of them. And this is right around the time that they're going to begin mating and laying their eggs in mass. Okay, so kind of talked about the general basics of why this is such a bad pest, why it's a nuisance and a problem. I haven't really talked yet about the tree of heaven issue. So spotted lanternfly, despite having this massive, massive broad host range, seems to love tree of heaven. It is its favorite food in the world. If given the choice, it will choose tree of heaven over anything else. In fact, in Pennsylvania, they've shown evidence of where they've cut tree of heaven down. All that's left is a stump. Spotted lanternfly adults will choose to feed on a stump of tree of heaven over a fully grown other tree, like say a walnut that's present. And that's a concern. If any of you are familiar with tree of heaven, it's all over our state. In fact, it's all over the eastern seaboard. This is a very prolific invasive pest plant. If you aren't familiar with it, after today, I hope you will be, and you'll start to realize, oh my gosh, we're just covered in this thing. So one of the key characteristics of tree of heaven is an allelopathic plant, and so basically it produces chemicals that will kill off other plants around it. It's capable of producing shoots about, I believe it's like 15 to 20 feet away from a main tree, and so you can get these saplings sprouting up from pretty far away. It is incredibly prolific. If you're driving down, let's use Interstate 40 as an example, it's hard to miss it. It's pretty much everywhere. And so when you realize that this is a favorite food for spotted lanternfly and their favorite food is all over the state, you kind of realize how quickly this can get out of control. So we're starting to near the time in the summer in North Carolina where you would begin to see these bright yellow samaras developing on the female tree of heaven. They have a relatively smooth bark. It's often described as resembling a cantaloupe skin. And one key characteristic, and I will show a picture later in the presentation, is it's a pretty light bark. You can actually see in this left picture here how light it is. But when there's a heavy infestation of spotted lanternfly and that black sooty mold begins developing, the trunk will basically turn black, and it's really, really amazing and kind of alarming to see. And to date, I don't think I mentioned this yet, spotted lanternfly has actually only killed tree of heaven, despite all of the different plants it has been attacking. Tree of heaven, I think just a sheer number that will end up on one tree. They're the only ones so far dying. Grape plants are certainly being affected. There's major issues with fruit production in vineyards up in Pennsylvania. But to my knowledge, only tree of heaven is the only tree that has actually been killed by this pest thus far. Other characteristics to consider with tree of heaven, it is a compound leaf, and each leaf is typically between 1 to 4 feet long. They have smooth leaf margins, so we have a number of lookalikes in North Carolina, but if you get up close and you look at those leaflets and you see smooth margins, you're most likely dealing with tree of heaven. Most of the lookalikes have serrated edges. They do have a relatively heart-shaped leaf scar, and you can see this on the little twigs and even on big limbs that have broken off. If you look at an individual leaflet, they do have the smooth margins, but at the very end, at the base of the leaf, you will see 2 little teeth, and if you flip it on the back, you'll see leaf glands, one on each side, which you can see in this third picture right here. And another distinct characteristic, if you're still in doubt if what you're looking at is tree of heaven, if you crack off a little twig or crush leaves and you sniff it, it will smell incredibly strongly of burnt peanut butter. It's almost repulsive. This is definitely truer for the new growth. The older growth doesn't have quite as potent of a smell, but that is a key way to know if you're still not certain of what you're looking at. That smell, it's noticeable and strong. Okay, so I'm gonna dive a little bit into the regulatory status of spotted lanternfly. We are a regulatory agency, and this is a big part of what we do. So as I mentioned earlier, it was first found in Pennsylvania in 2014 in Berks County, which is kind of the central, what I've been referring to as ground zero for spotted lanternfly. It was believed to have been introduced from Asia in 2012 on stone tile products. And so that kind of shows you the length of time. They did a trace back to kind of determine this, the length of time between the probably original introduction and actually seeing this pest, which, you know, when you start to think about, we've been looking pretty heavily for it here, it could be looking for a needle in haystack until it becomes an established population. Pennsylvania initially had quarantined 13 of their counties, but as recently, it was in March of this year, this county on the western side, Dauphin County, that's where Harrisburg, Pennsylvania is located. That was just added to the quarantine, bringing it up to 14 counties under quarantine. This map, this is produced by New York State's IPM program, but it is by far the best map for understanding where spotted lanternfly has been found and which areas are under regulation. So as of, I had it as May, this is actually as of June of this year, spotted lanternfly has been intercepted, which means a life stage was found. It does not mean it was established, but a life stage was intercepted in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, of course, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. Now, looking at this map, all of those yellow counties, those are the interceptions. So that means no infestation, there's not a confirmed established population, but a life stage was found. It might have been living, most of the time it was dead. In Massachusetts, that one on the far eastern side, that's in Boston, that was found adults on poinsettias this past winter. In New York, dead adults have been found associated with apples. There was one report that we got of a dead adult being found between flattened packing boxes. So this is a pest that's moving very easily through human activity, through commodities. And then the other thing worth looking at, that red line around the blue counties is showing the actual quarantines that are currently in place. So Pennsylvania has their big donut quarantined. New Jersey has 3 counties under quarantine. Delaware is quarantining by zip code at the moment. And Maryland has a reproducing population right here in Cecil County. But as far as I know, that is not actually under quarantine yet. And then here in Virginia, Frederick County, that has been recently added to the quarantine. There's a reproducing population in Winchester, Virginia. In 2017, They did a delimiting survey, and the population appeared to be about a mile radius. Unfortunately, by 2018, that had spread to about an 18 square mile radius. So Virginia is what we're keeping a close eye on. Obviously, they're our neighbor state. It's a little scary that it's that close. However, they did trace back the Virginia detection, and it actually is associated with that same original stone tile product from the Pennsylvania find. So you can see a very clear pathway there. And again, to highlight just how easily this pest can move on not even plants. It's because it can lay its eggs on just about anything. It's very easy to move. So leading more into that, regulated articles. I am not going to read this whole list. It's pretty massive. Obviously, all living life stages are restricted, no movement outside of quarantine areas. Landscaping, remodeling, construction waste, yard equipment. Any life stage can be moved. They are notorious hitchhikers. However, the eggs are by far the easiest to move because they are so camouflaged. The adults seem to have a preference for laying their eggs on rusted metal. Not sure why that is. Trains are a very common way this pest is currently being moved. But the point that I want to make with this slide is pretty much everything technically is regulated with spotted lanternfly because it can move on just about anything. Imagine you live, let's say, Philadelphia, and you decided to move to North Carolina. You have a bunch of yard equipment, you know, a grill, a children's play equipment. You need to inspect it before you move because it can be that easy. You move, an egg mass was laid, and you come down here, and then those eggs hatch, and suddenly we have spotted lanternfly in North Carolina. So this leads me into the spotted lanternfly permit. This is something that Pennsylvania initiated, New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia have all adopted. And what this essentially is any business that operates in the quarantine zone must have one of these permits. It was they had decals, and then they had the rear view mirror tags. Now it's a physical piece of paper permit that people carry with them. But this basically, anyone who wants this permit has to go on Pennsylvania's website or the state in question's website and take a small online course. And usually in this case, it would be a business owner or a manager, someone who's kind of higher up in the food chain for a business. They take this course. It teaches them what a quarantine is, what spotted lanternfly is, how it can be moved, life cycles, what the regulations are. And then the onus is on whoever took the course to then train their staff, and then those staff train their staff all the way down the line. And for businesses operating in the quarantine, this does not just mean someone who lives in these states. So this encompasses anyone who would do business. So our own nurseries, for example, if they happen to ship material into the Pennsylvania quarantine, they drive up there and they come back, they need to have one of these permits. Pennsylvania has instituted civil and criminal penalties. I think it goes up to something like $20,000. Now, they haven't actually fined it possible, but you can find a great deal of information about this pest, or about these permits, on Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's website, or the other states, New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia. Although if you go to Pennsylvania's, they have a lot of really good links to direct you to the other states in question. So I'm going to really briefly give some information about the trip we just took to Pennsylvania. It was incredibly informative, and I'm so glad we were able to do it. So this picture on the left, this was a maple, so not even tree of heaven, but it was one that was heavily, heavily infested. In fact, there was a whole row of them heavily infested with egg masses. So I don't know how well you all can see this in the picture. They are very camouflaged, but basically from here where my mouse is all the way up this branch, and then there's even more up here, are hatched egg masses. So this was a business that Pennsylvania Department of Ag took us to. They were doing an inventory and were planning to return to treat tree of heaven, or I think they had already treated these on the property. So once again, just highlighting how many eggs hatch. And this is on one single tree. And as I said, there was an entire row of these trees. We saw them in every single tree. We did notice they tend to like to lay their eggs on the underside of limbs in a more kind of protected area. We did see egg masses laid on rusted metal, as they had told us. Egg masses were not just on tree. In fact, we didn't see very many egg masses, if any, on Tree of Heaven. They were mostly on other stuff. That's not to say that they don't lay them. We just, on this specific trip, didn't happen to see them. This middle picture is kind of an interesting story and shows how randomly you can find spotted lanternfly. We had stopped to have lunch, a whole group of us. There were about 20 of us. And as the group was kind of trickling out of the restaurant at the end of the meal, someone noticed a few little rose bushes at a house that was across from the parking lot. Walked over, and sure enough, there are spotted lanternfly nymphs just all over this rose bush, just in a homeowner's yard, and right next to the restaurant. And we weren't even looking. It was just kind of one of those random things. And so kind of wherever we looked, we were finding these nymphs. And sometimes it would just be one or two nymphs. Sometimes it was a whole clump like this. And in this third picture, you can see, I don't know how well you can see actually, each one of these little spots is another little clump of the nymphs. This is on Tree of Heaven, but you can see behind this big trunk, it's basically black. This is the one I was mentioning earlier. So this is a Tree of Heaven that was heavily infested, and there's just black sooty mold covering the entire thing. So we didn't, because we were early enough in the year, we only saw either hatched egg masses or these nymphs, but I can only imagine what it must look like up there during actual, adult flight season or adult crawling season, as it were. It's unreal. And I thought we had Tree of Heaven bad here, and we do, but Pennsylvania, it's amazing how much Tree of Heaven we saw up there. And so this pest will have food for quite some time, because controlling Tree of Heaven is very challenging. Once you cut it down, it puts up more sprouts, and it just keeps on keeping on. I'm going to really, really briefly touch on what research studies are underway. This is not something that we're involved in. Right now, it's mostly Penn State that's doing this research, but they are looking at host preference and suitability studies. I've pretty heavily mentioned how much spotted lanternfly loves Tree of Heaven. The thought is that Tree of Heaven is actually required for spotted lanternfly to complete its life cycle. However, that hasn't been proven yet. So we're really hoping with another year or two of research that they'll be able to definitively say, yes, Tree of Heaven is required, or no, it is able to complete an entire life cycle without Tree of Heaven. That will help with understanding management and suppression, and maybe one day eradication, although that's being talked about less and less, unfortunately. There are traps and lures being investigated. Right now, the primary lure is simply methyl salicylate, so it's just a chemical component. It works, but a pheromone would be ideal. I don't know that there is anything in the pipeline for pheromone production yet, but that is something being considered. And then as for traps, the main one that was being used in Pennsylvania are just your classic sticky bands, which a lot of us have seen here in North Carolina, put around trees for cankerworm. These are great. They're really effective at catching a bunch of nymphs. However, they also catch a lot of other things, birds, mammals. I've heard reports of snakes. And some people in Pennsylvania are really engaged with this pest and really do want to do everything they can, but homeowners are getting a little overzealous, and some of them are taking sticky bands and wrapping the tree from the base all the way up as high as they can go, which, love that they're doing their thing, but maybe not the best for the tree. And unfortunately, it's getting a lot of stuff that does not need to be caught on these sticky bands. The bug berries are a slightly better version of a sticky band. It's essentially an inverse sticky band where the sticky is on the inside, and there's a small bit of kind of like foam that keeps the barrier from touching the tree, so the insects will crawl up and hit that barrier and get stuck. But the circle traps, the third one, have proven to be the most effective at catching spotted lanternfly as they crawl up a tree. It looks kind of like a net that's stapled to a tree with a cup at the top. The problem with those is that they are very difficult to produce. They're being handmade right now, and USDA has said that they think they'll be able to have 100 made by the time I think it was by August, and that's for all the states that are interested in having them. So you can realize that while they might be effective, it's not really great when you can only make 100 for an entire season. And then kind of the last bit of research that's being heavily looked into, of course, is biological control. There's a few promising things. There's some predators, stink bug, assassin bug, praying mantises, some spiders, classic fungal pathogens, entomologist species. Bavaria bassiana is a species that's been proven to be effective. That's used for a bunch of different biocontrol, and it's already found in the environment. There's some parasitoids being looked at, some that are native to here, some that are native to Asia, where the pest is actually from. But all of this is to say, I haven't actually touched on yet, spotted lanternfly itself is quite easy to kill. The problem is the sheer numbers and controlling the spread, especially when the host material is so abundant. So in Pennsylvania, and I keep using them as the example since they're truly the hot spot for this, they are basically going to businesses and homeowners and all sorts of, they're doing this massive survey looking for tree of heaven and spotted lanternfly. And for tree of heaven, what they're doing is any trees that are 6 inches DBH or less are getting an herbicide treatment to kill it. And trees that are greater than 6 inches DBH are actually getting an insecticide treatment. So they're treating with, it's called Transtec, but it's dinotefuran. So Safari is another one that would work for this. And it's a bark spray, and they get 1 treatment per year. And they're essentially calling these trap trees. They leave these up in order to attract the adults in, kill as many adults as possible, while removing all of the smaller growth. And, you know, we'll probably need a little more time to see how effective this will be, but hopefully it is actually doing some good suppression and slowing the spread of this pest. So what is the plan here? What are we actually going to do about this? So right now we are doing a massive statewide survey for Tree of Heaven, which I kind of laugh when I talk about because, as I said, if you're already familiar with it, you know how much Tree of Heaven there is, and if you're not, you'll come to realize it pretty quickly. But we have got permanent staff, we've got our specialists, program managers, temporary employees, all over the state, marking Tree of Heaven on an app that we've produced, and just trying to get an idea of if it shows up, where our target area is going to be. And as I said, railroads seems to be a very key one. We're also doing visual surveys for life stages throughout the entire state. We're focusing on things like state parks, rest areas, hardscape businesses, big metropolitan areas, tourism hotspots, basically anywhere where there's going to be lots of human activity, people coming in, moving around, especially people potentially coming in from other states like Pennsylvania, and places where there's, you know, heavy traffic in terms of movement of commodities. All of those things are things we're looking at. Outreach is a huge component of what we're doing. We've been working closely with the Forest Service, of course, Cooperative Extension, the university, and Master Gardeners. We really want to do a train the trainer with as many Master Gardeners as possible to teach people what to look for with spotted lanternfly, really get a feel for the life stages. You know, right now we'd probably be seeing, if it were here, probably the 3rd instars, maybe the beginning of those 4th instars. But we want as many people to be engaged in this pest, looking for. So this slide, these are 3 posters that we have developed. You may have already seen some of these. The one on the far right has been put up at rest areas throughout the entire state. Every extension office has either already received or is about to receive these 3 posters to put up in their offices. Forest Service offices have these. If you have ideas of where we can put them up, that is something that we are very open to getting suggestions on. If you want to help spread materials, pass materials around, we have the posters. We have these Master Gardener pins that we've developed that have a little scroll inside that go over the life stages and have our contact info on it. We have developed coasters to take to breweries and vineyards that really focus on the fact that hops and grapes are 2 of the key pests 2 of the key hosts for spotted lanternfly and major threats to those commodities. we basically want this message spread as far and wide as possible. And so this is where you all come in and can help us with that. But I guess I'll kind of sum up. This is our chance for questions to discuss. I know I kind of blew through a lot of this very rapidly. So anyway, thank you for listening to me on this subject.
Thank you, Whitney. And we do have some questions already in the chat. So I thought maybe we'll do, there's 3 in the chat. We'll do those, and then people can continue adding to the chat, or they can jump on their mic and ask.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first question from the chat is, what does it mean to be under regulation or quarantined? So we're not in North Carolina under regulation or quarantine, but if we were to become, or for states that are, what does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So we'll go with quarantine first. So essentially that means it can be as small as a municipality, or it can be as large as an entire state, or an entire section of the country. And so what that is basically legalese that says X commodity or X insect or pathogen, what have you, cannot move except under specific conditions. So with spotted lanternfly, that's a difficult one because, as I mentioned with that one slide, everything is kind of regulated. Let me give an easier example. We'll go with sweet potato weevil, obviously not what we're talking about today, but with sweet potato weevil, that is a pest that affects sweet potatoes, as its name sounds, but it also affects all things in the Ipomea genus. And so we have a quarantine on states that have sweet potato weevil, southern states. And so any state that we have placed under quarantine is not allowed to ship us sweet potatoes or any Ipomea, so morning glory or ornamental sweet potato, from those states that are known to have sweet potato weevil. And so the same would hold true for spotted lanternfly. Essentially, a living insect life stage or any commodity within a quarantined area as determined based on presence of the pest is not allowed to move at all, or it can be, there's specific conditions that allow for movement. So that permit, for example, if a business goes through the effort to obtain one of these permits, they're saying they understand what a quarantine is, the steps involved. They have to do self-inspection. So oftentimes, we as a regulatory agency will inspect shipments of material leaving North Carolina to ensure it's free from pests. And we'll write, say, a state phytosanitary certificate attesting to the fact that the product has been inspected and found to be free of injurious pests. So that's kind of the general concept. So yes, as Charlotte said, we are not under quarantine. We are not personally regulated for spotted lanternfly because we do not have it here yet. And on the inverse, we have not regulated anyone else for this pest yet. However, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware and Virginia have, so they have those restrictions. And then I didn't touch on this part. New York has actually instituted an external quarantine on all of those areas. So New York is saying that all of these states that do have reproducing populations must basically comply with their quarantine legalese, which is pretty much the same as the internal ones, saying don't move commodities that are potentially infested, must be inspected, kind of what have you, things like that.
Okay, so we have 2 kind of related questions. I'll go ahead and do those 2 and then come back to a couple more. So is this affecting cars traveling from Pennsylvania to North Carolina?
Yes, so Pennsylvania has begun doing, they've had a few kind of blitzes is what I'll call them on the turnpike. They're not on a consistent basis, they're random, and the blitzes are both to stop cars and inspect them, but also educate people moving in and out. And similar with truckers, Pennsylvania has done an incredible job of trying to get the word out. They've actually already issued over 400,000 of these permits. And truckers, if they don't already know about it, we're trying to get as many people truckers is great, that are moving material to know about this as possible. And so a big part of that is with the outreach effort. They're also doing roadside inspections for truckers specifically, where they're stopping trucks and they've got these long mirrors, like they're on this really long stick that they can put under the trucks and look for egg masses. We learned from our recent trip, they're actually hoping to start testing drones that will have cameras. They can look at the tops of trucks, something that's much more difficult for us to see being so low to the ground. So yes, truckers are informed, not obviously 100%. It's something that continues, the word needs to be spread, but that is something being looked at for sure. So I see one of the part of that question is, I have a compost hauler farmer who travels back and forth to PA. That would be a good person to inform about this and make sure that they get permitted if need be. Anyone who is doing any sort of business where they're going back and forth regularly, or if you are just a regular citizen, if you happen to go into one of these areas, please inspect your vehicle before coming back. Maybe even take it to a car wash and get your vehicle, you can take it through one of those with the high-speed brushes and whatnot. Any little extra thing you can do when traveling to and from the quarantine areas is appreciated to prevent it coming to our state or any other non-infested area.
Whitney, this is Joy. If I could just interject, and
by all means, yes.
We have a press release in the works that will be going out as soon as it is approved, and it is highlighting where the quarantine area is and targeting tourists, anybody who'd be traveling to Pennsylvania or through any of the quarantine areas and coming back to North Carolina. So our goal is to do kind of a mass press release, not necessarily getting out images yet for everyone to be looking, because the instars are difficult to identify, but more just a matter of making people be very conscious of, hey, if you're going camping in these areas, or if you're even traveling through as part of your vacation, to alert citizens to be aware if they're coming back into the state of North Carolina, to check their vehicles, to wash, those kind of things. So we do have a press release in the works that'll be out very shortly.
All right, so we have a question about what is the protocol if we spot one of these or suspect we've seen one?
Excellent question. So let me actually go back one slide. Oops. So we have developed an email, badbug@ncagr.gov, which you can see in the bottom of these, two of these posters. That is specifically for reporting spotted lanternfly. I really ask that if possible, if you think you've seen it, please take a picture. I would much rather get 1,000 pictures of false alarms than have, miss the one real spotted lanternfly that's here. So you can send, if you think you've seen the pest, you can send it to that bad bug email. You can, of course, call our hotline or call me directly. I'll go back in a moment to my contact information. Allison Ballantyne, who is also with us today, she will also be very heavily involved in spotted lanternfly. She's kind of now our Gypsy Moth / spotted lanternfly program manager. Those were, I would say the bad bug email would be the best way, because pictures would be very helpful to us. But if that's not possible for whatever reason, giving us a call would absolutely be fine too, and we can come out and visit a site if there's any concern. So that would be the best way to get in touch. And we do have a website specifically for spotted lanternfly as well, which you can again see in that yellow text. I try to update it regularly. It probably needs a good update with at least the most recent map and what life stages people would be seeing. But those are all good tools you can be using. So let me go back to my contact info.
And this is Joy. I'll chime in again. So one of our major ideas is someone had asked if Extension should be utilizing citizen scientists, and that really has been one of our goals all along, is to begin developing materials, developing trainings, and getting those in the hands of all Extension offices, so that we can absolutely utilize master gardeners and other citizen scientists to be looking for us. The push really will be in August, whenever the adult life cycle is there, because that will be when it's most likely to be able to be identified. So we are working as hard as we can to get as many materials together to be able to share with Extension, to be able to work up trainings that will be then disseminated to, certainly can't go to every office, but our goal is to work with Charlotte to figure out how to best disseminate materials, how to best do a train-the-trainer type event, so that all county offices who have any interest at all in learning more about this, and certainly being our eyes in every county and looking for this pest, can be notified. So that's absolutely one of our primary goals for the summer, and we plan to have that roll out by August. And someone else did ask if the press release will be available for extension release, and certainly as soon as it's released through our public relation department, I will make sure that it is sent to Charlotte, and it can go out to all the county offices, and you guys can utilize that in any way you choose.
All right, excellent. So we had one person say they were having trouble hearing Joy just then. And so Joy was just saying the press release will be sent out, and I'll make sure it gets out to all the county offices. Also, there was a question about the slides, and Whitney has agreed to share the slides. So they'll be posted on NCSU Garden and be sent out in the email that follows up to this Plant Specimen Pathogens webinar. You'll be able to review the slides. Let's see, we got some more questions in the list. The material. So the website you mentioned, Whitney, are there images and materials available that Master Gardener volunteers and agents can post to social media and use in newsletters that are public domain, or, you know, we have permission to use?
Yes, so if you actually go to, I believe it's like bugwood.com, all of these photos, they're all taken in Pennsylvania. They have all been made public domain, and you're welcome to download any of them. I do have 4 on our website. They may have been reduced in quality when I uploaded them, so I do highly recommend, if you want to use those photos, just go to Bugwood. There's a massive, massive repository of probably 1,000 or more spotted lanternfly photos of all life stages and damage and whatnot. Yes, that's the link. Thank you so much. So absolutely. And I would say at the moment, the best resources are actually, in terms of handouts, are on Penn State's website. I have made a pest watch for our state. It's pretty up to date. I think I actually updated it maybe a few weeks ago, but I'm thinking of developing some new stuff that can be downloaded from our website as we go on. And so if you have specific types of materials, let me know, or if it's something you want to develop yourself and run by, I'm happy either way. For us, the more people spreading the message, the better. And so, but for now, I would say the best materials can be found on Penn State's website. They are absolutely leading the show on spotted lanternfly outreach. They've hired people that their only job is doing spotted lanternfly outreach.
So one of the questions we got was, how soon can we expect for it to be in North Carolina? And that is part of the reason that we have amped up our efforts. And to answer the question that Whitney just said is, why aren't there all these materials available if we're so concerned about this? Well, we knew that there was a potential for it to come, and it wasn't until February of this year where we went to a training and we heard a switch from the term eradication in the areas that were quarantined to more of a control the spread, and we realized very quickly that how and we also heard how established it had become in Virginia, where it had gone from 1 square mile to 16 square miles in the course of a year, and that at that time Virginia did not have a quarantine. So we were fully aware that this could move into North Carolina pretty quickly. So we immediately amped up our efforts in February. So what we've done from then until now has been this push of information and developing of material. So if it feels like we may be slightly underprepared as far as outreach materials, we're working on those as hard as we can. We have our people out surveying currently, and we're doing everything we can from the regulatory standpoint to prepare, to have a reaction in place, and to do all we can to push out solid information so that we have as many people looking for us as possible.
And so one of the questions is, what could we be doing now? This is from Gina Myers, the agent in Wake County, to prepare our Master Gardener volunteers. And I know we've talked a little bit about making sure people are able to identify a tree of heaven, since that's going to be a real target tree. Are there other things you would recommend that agents could be doing right now, or Master Gardener volunteers could be doing right now to kind of be prepared to be on the lookout?
So I don't know if you want to take this or you want me to take this, Joy. I'll start. I would say a key thing that can be done is definitely becoming familiar with Tree of Heaven, and if you see it and have time, walk up to it and see what you see, because even though we don't think the pest is here yet, technically it could be, and it's probably going to be found by just a normal person out and about who just sees something that looks slightly suspicious. If and when you can, talk to businesses and let them know about, businesses that would be doing work, traveling in and out of these quarantines. Let them know about it. Make sure they're educated, because they need to be protected too. I would just say talking to as many people as possible. Like our main thing is we just don't want this to be a year from now it shows up and people are wondering why no one's been talking about it. We just want to try and spread the word as far and wide as possible. And Joy, I'll let you chime in if there's additional things I'm not considering at the moment.
Sure. Whitney mentioned earlier that we just got them in the last week. We have these fantastic pens that we can't take credit for because we kind of stole the idea from Maryland, but they're these really great ink pens that have a scroll that has all the pictured life cycle with our bad bug. It is such a terrific tool for master gardeners to have in their hand, to have in their pocket, to have in their toolbox, to have in their car, so that if they're out and about and they see something they think may be spotted lanternfly, they can use that scroll as a guide to help them as an identification tool. We will gladly get those out. We just need to know, instead of broadcasting them out to every office, to every potential master gardener, we need to know those who are training their master gardeners so that we can then get you the pens in hand to hand out at that time. We have a couple other materials as well, but we're happy to get those out. We have extra posters, and posters are cheap to print. If you guys know of a place, if you want additional posters to go anywhere, we will gladly make those for you. We've talked about, we're in the process of making pamphlets that can go out as well. So if you have ideas on those, or if you would like some of those. So if you know that you have a group that will be hungry for this information and excited to get out and get started looking, if you'll reach out to Whitney and Allison, they will be more than happy to provide what we have to you, as well as work with you if there's something specific that you think would be beneficial to your group. So we are very grateful for any help that we can get through the Extension Master Gardeners.
All right, so Joy, are you recommending that the agents contact Whitney or Allison to ask for those resources, like the ink pens and the posters, be sent to their office for their Master Gardener volunteers, instead of individual Master Gardener volunteers contacting for one or two? Okay. All right.
Allison is going to put her email in right now. And so you guys, if you just want to copy that down, she'll be glad to orchestrate that.
And I'm going to backtrack for just a second because I don't want the question to get lost in the mix. I did see much further up, somebody asked if Tree of Heaven looks similar to mimosa. The answer is technically yes when you're far away from it. I've gotten fooled numerous times, but once you get right up on the tree or even a few feet away, mimosa has really, really tiny leaflets and their compound leaves are much shorter. So you can get fooled from far away, but once you get close up, it's very obvious the difference between Tree of Heaven and mimosa. Just didn't want that question to get lost in the mix.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll send out, there's a lot of websites and resources out there to help identify Tree of Heaven. So in the follow-up email for today's Plants, Pests, and Pathogens, I'll have links to the resources that Whitney and Joy have shared, the Penn State resources, where you can get the images from Bugwood, the ncagr.gov/spotted lanternfly website, the bad bug email address, and other things that are out there that can help you get prepared now to identify Tree of Heaven, to know what you're looking for with these insects.
And to answer that most recent question, it very closely resembles sumac. However, sumac has serrated edges on their leaves and Tree of Heaven doesn't. So that is one key way you can tell it apart. Sumac will also have their flowers grow straight up and it's bright red. Tree of Heaven will not have anything that's that bold of a red. Now it will have some slight red new leaf growth occasionally, but it will not have that bold red vertical shaped flower. Yeah, that link is very good.
we asked the question of Pennsylvania, you know, our recommendation has been to start telling, particularly vineyards, you know, get rid of your tree of heaven. Really be conscious of that and start removing it. And that I still think that's very sound advice. I will say the one caveat to that is, and there's really no worry at this point of eradicating tree of heaven in North Carolina and this being a problem just simply because of how prolific it is. However, one of the issues is if we take away all the tree of heaven, it may decide that it likes something else better. So at least now it's you know, congregating on an invasive that we don't really want anyway, and it's pretty easy to spot. And so if you remove all tree of heaven, will it then find something else that is more problematic for us? But I don't really think that's a worry at this point. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'd like to, so that is another tip that you could put out there is certainly to be not only just looking for and identifying tree of heaven, but going ahead and eradicating tree of heaven from properties, particularly properties that have significant other hosts on there that they would want to safeguard. So vineyards in particular, orchards, anybody with even, you know, backyard horticultural crops that they want to safeguard, I would really lean towards encouraging them to get rid of tree of heaven.
Yeah, there's pictures from Pennsylvania of people's just little vegetable gardens in their yards where they're spotted lanternfly on their peppers, on their basil, on their blueberry plants. They're just gonna, especially those early stages, they're generalists and they will feed on just about everything. And they are piercing, sucking. So anything producing a high turgor pressure is pretty attractive to these pests. As I said, it's not killing them, but it's not helping them. I mean, it's that black sooty mold. It's the honeydew. It hurts everything, for lack of a better description. Those links are all great, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just dropped a bunch of links into the chat list and they'll go out in the follow-up email. But unfortunately, I think we need to wrap up this discussion so we could get Mike Munster to come in and share some updates on current plant disease issues. Thank you so much to Whitney, Joy, and Allison for joining us today and for everything you've shared with us. And we look forward to continuing working with you and continuing the conversation and getting the word out so that we can all be on the lookout here in North Carolina. So as you see, we have a very ready and willing audience to help get the message out. So anything we can do, let us know.
Thank you so much.
All right. All right, thank you. So Mike Munster, if you are out there.
At your service.
I have somehow lost my screen for, so if you get to share your slides, I'm going to see if I can actually find where Zoom went.
Okay, I will share away. Okay, now I'm trying to hover over here and figure out where the, oops, now my screen went black. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and we just see a picture right now of like a really close-up cell shot. There we go. It says you've started sharing your screen. Haven't got a picture yet.
Yeah, it seems to be loading very slowly, the whole framework here. And I'm not seeing the... Let's see what happens. Oh, there it went. All right. Can you see the photographs of two trees here?
Yes, they both look dead.
That has been a problem. Now, oftentimes on this program, we talk about things that we know the answer to, but here's a case where we don't. It seems that during the month of June, there have been a lot of oak trees, particularly in the red oak group, even very mature trees that have died suddenly. And here are a couple of photographs left from Onslow County and on the right from, let's see, I can't even see my note here. Okay, I'm getting my chat box open here too on the side. But what I wanted to say was, if other people are seeing this, it's a little hard to tell where the border between North Carolina and our neighboring states are, but if you can orient yourselves to this, if anyone has seen this sort of a problem this month, talking again about the very sudden collapse of mature oak trees, if you could go ahead and drop an annotation on there, a mark, because I'd be curious to see if it's showing up other than the places that we've received samples and images from. So I'll give you a second to do that.
In the chat, we've got some reported in Robeson County.
All right, I don't know why my chat box isn't staying open. There it is. Robinson, okay. Another few seconds here. Oh, Hoke County. All right, so this is very interesting. I don't know if we're talking about the same situations or not, but if you look at the map of where we've seen this problem, go ahead and advance the slide here. It's overlays kind of nicely with where you've put your check marks. Now we've, like I say, haven't figured out what's the cause of this, but we're speculating that it may have something to do with the really excessive rainfall last year. Folks down in Wilmington had a record. They had over 100 inches of rain last year. And then this spring, basically late April through May, there was an extended dry period. So we're wondering if it may be that the trees, the root systems were somehow stressed first by the excess water and then by the lack of water, and are therefore showing these symptoms and dying really. But we don't have a good handle on it, so we'll continue to see what people are sending in and may or may not be able to eventually figure it out. Just so you know that we don't have all the answers ourselves either. Someone asked the question, how about an instant death of a mature cedar, random mature evergreen death in Carteret? We have not seen that. It's mostly been oaks that we've been looking at. And cedars, of course, if you mean something like, was it a deodar or what sort of cedar trees wrong, or a juniper? Okay, because we do get certain diseases, but it wouldn't be that sudden, let's say on juniper, that could cause the death of the tree. Could this be related to sudden oak death syndrome as in California? We don't have any reason to believe that that's the case. The presence of sudden oak death on oak trees has never been confirmed in North Carolina. Okay, on a native red cedar. I'm not sure what that would be, but again, we haven't seen, let's say, a spate of those cases of cedar trees going down. So stay tuned on this one. I just want to mention one little hole in my theory here. I'm going to go and try and remove the annotations. I'm not sure, do I have the power to erase all of these? If you notice that if you see a single tree like this, out in the open especially, and if I'm seeing the one on the right, one of the things you want to think about is lightning injury. Of course, that would happen very quickly. And you would see, though, splitting bark running vertically down the trunk. So that's something always to look for in cases like this. And the reason I show this picture again is just to say that I don't know how our water drought theory stacks up when you see some perfectly healthy trees kind of in the same area here. So again, jury's still out. What about dogwood leaves turning black? If the question is whether we've been seeing a lot of that, no, we have not seen a great deal of dogwood or with blackening leaves. Maples in New Hanover coast. Well, again, anything happening in New Hanover County, I'm going to start with a suspicion of something having to do with all the water. Oh, by the way, I am broadcasting from the clinic here today, so you may hear some background noise, and you're about to hear one for a second. Okay. All right, I'm back. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, moving along then. Just to show that I do occasionally get things right, I believe this was a disease that I had in the BOLO list for June in our last program. And it did show up. Actually, commercial operation sent in these photos and some physical samples. So in patients showing the death of the stems rot at the soil line. When they sent in the physical sample, we got to look at it, and it turns out that there was some nice ahead on the leading edge of where the decay was. You could see some of the nice hyphae, the mycelium of the fungus Rhizoctonia there, causing this sort of collapse. And that's something that differentiates it from impatiens downy mildew, where you'll see basically the stems as the last thing standing after the leaves have all fallen off. So a little pop quiz here. As I was putting together the bolos, I realized a lot of these things are in what we would loosely call Cercospora leaf spots, although the scientific names of the fungi that cause them have been split up into 3 or 4 different genera, or if you, well, I say 4, I'm counting Mycosphaerella, which is the sexual stage. But looking at just the names that you'd most commonly see for these, if you could take out a slip of paper and number it from 1 to 6 and see if you can come up with a host of these different fungi that are causing Cercospora leaf spots.
So you're telling us there's a hint in the disease name?
I could have said that, and that would have been a great thing to say. They just get progressively a little bit more opaque as you go down the list. I see Charlotte is smiling, but I guess that's her photo, her stock photo that she's, but I can hear you smiling. All right, give folks another minute here. I see that just while folks are doing this, that Whitney is still on. Allison, I don't know if Joy is still on, but while they were doing their presentation, one of the things that popped into my mind about the whole thing about travel and the center of the Lanternfly being in Pennsylvania, I wonder if somebody could take the the song Home for the Holidays and the verse that talks about folks are traveling from Pennsylvania down to Dixie's sunny shores and maybe working a little Lanternfly public education into a new set of lyrics from that song.
That's awesome, Mike. You should get on that. This is Joy.
Joy, did you say I should get on that?
You should get right on that, yes.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
We also need a group. We have decided that our bad bug email needs to have the bad bug, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you song? I'm not musically inclined, obviously, so we need somebody to get on that as well.
Yeah, I'll pass on that one.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Do it in your spare time when you're not busy enjoying pathogens.
All right. Let's take these. I think I may actually have them in order, except for the last one, which I don't have a picture of. So remind me to mention it. The first on the list, hopefully everybody has figured out that that is Cercospora leaf spot on hydrangea, which we see in the late summer and into the fall every year on our big leaf hydrangeas. And there's also a Cornespora leaf spot, which I pointed out before. Looks a little different. The Cornespora would have more of a target-shaped appearance and may lack that bright light or light center that the Cercospora would have. I think that Cercospora is the one that you're going to more commonly see. And another thing to not confuse it with on hydrangea is the big wilted blotches that you get when they've been under some water stress. The answer to number 2 is Passiflora sursodicola is a leaf spot of redbud, which shows up in the fall, in the summer in June every year. And this, as most of our leaf spots on deciduous plants, is not a threat to the life of the tree. It's just a cosmetic issue. But if you do get questions about it, we have a Cercospora leaf spot, technically now classified as a species of Passiflora. The third one, you probably guessed, Passiflora, Rosicola would be on rose. But the question here is, which one of the 3 is it? Now, I have not been, let's see, polls. Did we set up a poll here? Let me launch it. So there are excess options here, but choosing between A, B, and C. All right, countdown: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ending the polling now. About half the folks voted. And I think I have to share the results so that they show up. And it looks like, well, nobody voted for D or E. That's good. Unfortunately, B is black spot on rose. Notice the very dark spot and the sort of feathered edge. That's how you distinguish black spot. The one A is downy mildew. Not something you're going to see in a home landscape situation. It is C, so the 4 folks who got that, pat yourself on the back. That is Cercospora leaf spot. Notice that the edge of the spot is much more clearly defined, but it shares in common with black spot the possibility that you would have the yellowing, the chlorosis, and the leaf drop. It's going to be something that you'll see in the hot, wet weather. And unfortunately, the roses that have resistance to one of the 2 diseases, black spot or Cercospora, don't necessarily have it to both. So you can check lists like the one in the IPM guide, which I've shared, I think it was last time, or the time before that, for the ratings on susceptibility of different rose cultivars to these 2 diseases. All right. Passiflora circumcissa. That is actually a wonderful name because of the way that it clips out, or appears to clip out, the spots. What's actually happening, I'll show you in a moment. This is a pathogen on, you see it on the ornamental cherries, the flowering cherries. And if you take a close look, you'll notice that the spots develop as little round, brown necrotic tissue, but the tissue separates itself out from the host plant. So you'll notice here that dead area is getting ready to drop out, and that's actually a host response. So it's not specific. For example, on cherry laurel, you could this kind of shot hole a lot, and it's not necessarily. In fact, I've never seen for this particular fungus that I'm sure of on a cherry laurel with shot hole. If you take an extreme close-up on the right there, you can see the little tufts of the fruiting bodies or the spore-producing structures there in the dead tissue. Angular leaf spot, Pseudocercospora griseola. If you guessed beans, then you would be correct there. And I believe I talked about this on the program, oh, it's been a while though, on that. So that is a disease that we could be watching for now on our beans in the vegetable garden. Backing up, sorry about that. I should have said that the very last one there on the quiz, the Pseudocercospora lyranthicula was on crepe myrtle, which is in the Lyraceae, I can't say it, Lyraceae. And I had looked for some of that actually before the program this morning and couldn't find any to be able to show you some good pictures of it. Staying with the vegetable garden really quickly, common corn smut is something to be looking for. I think I saw some about a leaf infection in my vegetable garden and hoping to find it in the ears because this is good eating if you get it fresh and cook it up, kind of saute it a little bit. Considered a delicacy in Mexico. Those of you who know me know that I live there. My wife is from there, lived there for 6 years. And if you haven't tried it, it's certainly worthwhile. Moving quickly to our bolos, the #1 bolo for July and August is going to be heat and drought stress on our trees and shrubs, especially if they've been recently transplanted or are in areas with a lot of impervious and reflective surfaces or have poor root systems. We may see this sort of thing on sycamore. Here are pictures from 2010, actually, in a series. Sycamore with big leaf blotches and defoliation. Yellow poplar, of course, turning yellow and dropping its leaves. And river birch, as the name suggests, probably doesn't like it too dry, and you can see how it will shed leaves when things get dry. Dogwood, here's a heat and drought type scorch symptom on dogwood, not to be confused with, anybody know what that is on the right? Talked about it before, that is powdery mildew. And on our oaks, you might confuse the scorch due to heat and drought with this poster child of plant diseases, bacterial leaf scorch. Notice that sort of marbled pattern between the dead and live tissue on that leaf. What to do about it? Well, proper planting is important to start with, not too deep, not mulching too deep. Keeping it watered, an inch of water every week, 10 days until that tree is established. Some more bolos for July. On many different things in the vegetable garden, we're going to see the possibility of poor fruit set due to high temperatures, root knot nematodes, and southern stem blight. I've mentioned some of those before. Blossom end rot of tomato and pepper, we talk about it a lot on tomato, but occasionally it does occur on pepper, as you can see in the photo here, but it's not necessarily restricted to the blossom end when it occurs on pepper, so be aware of that. And all of the tomato problems from last month's bolos, or for the June list of bolos, you can keep all those, but then add fruit symptoms of tomato spotted wilt, as you see in the lower right photograph there. Magnesium deficiency, that yellow interveinal discoloration, the chlorosis on the lower leaves is typical of the magnesium deficiency in tomato, and physiological leaf roll when you get the hot conditions. Whether it be late light, when will it come in? We don't know, but interested parties with tomatoes in our mountains should certainly be keeping an eye out for that starting in June. Continuing with our vegetables and herbs, basil downy mildew. A few years ago, I was talking to some vendors at the farmers market here in Raleigh who said that they stopped selling basil after the 4th of July because this disease just gets too bad. So if you are seeing leaf spotting and problems on your basil, look on the underside and look for the typical, in this case, grayish, bluish sporulation of the pathogen. On beans, we already talked about the Cercospora leaf spots or the angular leaf spot, but also be aware of anthracnose on leaves, stems, and pods. You can see the pod infection there in the lower right. I think the lima bean is particularly susceptible to that, but not restricted to lima bean certainly, and also Rhizoctonia stem rot. Our cucurbits will be heading into a long list of problems, just to mention a few. On the disease side, downy mildew, we've already had it reported in the state on cucumber so far this year. Powdery mildew, especially on squash and pumpkin, anthracnose, fusarium wilt, gummy stem blight, especially on watermelon, and our aphid-borne viruses. Not to mention, of course, Matt's not here to do the insect bolos, but not to mention, like I say, I'm mentioning the squash vine borer and squash bugs as problems on the cucurbits. For the flowers and perennials, you can add these to last month's list. A couple of leaf spot, or a leaf spot with a couple of names on iris, also bacterial soft rot there in the rhizome. Liriope, anthracnose on the leaf tips, but also if the whole plant is going down, the two main possibilities would be Fusarium crown rot or Phytophthora root and crown rot. You might want to get a diagnosis in those cases because the implications of the two are different as far as what can be planted after that. Peony has a disease called measles or leaf blotch, a fungal disease. You can see the illustration down at the bottom there, although these can get quite large, these red blotches on peony. And tobacco rattlevirus causing a nice ring spot pattern on peony as well. A couple of crown stem rots on petunia to be aware of, Phytophthora and Rhizoctonia. We'll be seeing probably on Rudbeckia everywhere, Septoria leaf spot, and you also may run across aster yellows with the virescence, the green coloration of the flower instead of the normal. On annual vinca, Phytophthora root rot and aerial blight, which has been on the show frequently, and also Rhizoctonia area blight, not to be confused with it. Zinnia, powdery mildew, alternaria leaf spot, and bacterial leaf spot all could be coming your way. For turf grasses, again, I'm not the turf grass expert, but brown patch on our cool season grasses is going to be, of course, prevalent, probably already is. Fairy ring on all turf grasses, gray leaf spot pictured on the right there on fescue and St. Augustine grass, and Pythian blight pictured down at the bottom. You'll notice that the symptoms of some of these at a distance look similar, but when you get in close, you don't see the individual leaf spots with the Pythian blight, and under humid conditions, you may even see the mycelium of the Pythium growing out there on the grass blades. Summer patch and chinch bugs on St. Augustine, something to be considering when you're diagnosing. For the large and small fruits, black rot, bitter rot, sooty blotch, and fly speck on our apple fruits, cane blight on blackberry, Botryophyria stem blight and Phytophthora root rot on blueberry. We talked quite a bit about grapes last program to be aware of on bunch grape for the month of July, downy mildew, anthracnose, and black rot on the fruit. With muscadines, the black rot appears on the leaves, and both types of grapes, Pierce's disease is something that could be coming in now, as well as herbicide injury. The photo on the lower right is Pierce's disease, which is caused by a bacterium transmitted by leafhoppers. Brown rot, pictured in the lower left, and scab in the lower center are some peach fruit diseases that will be in season. Finally, shade trees and shrubs, heat and drought stress, as mentioned, also cold injury. I may have told the story before how when I first worked in the clinic back in the late 90s and Tom Cresswell was diagnosing cold injury in August, and I was wondering how was this possible? Well, of course, it's the leftover effect of the trees that were damaged down at the base of the main stem. You see the split bark, and the symptoms don't show up until, or the other symptoms don't show up as far as general decline until the tree or shrub is under stress in the hot, dry weather. Powdery mildew on the usual hosts, and Phytophthora armillaria root rots to always be on your BOLA list. Ceridium canker on leyland cypress, seen there on the right. Slime flux and bacterial leaf scorch are two big classic diseases or conditions for the heat of the summer. And with that, let me see if there were any questions. I know it was a little bit hurried there, but there's a lot to say this time of year, and also even so have to be selective. So there are more things that could have been on the BOLA list, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
All right, Mike, while people are getting their questions ready and maybe putting them in the chat, I'm going to just switch over to a few closing slides. Would that be all right?
Yes.
All right.
On the unshare here. Or can you bump me off?
I think so. Can you guys see a slide now of Tree of Heaven? Do you see that? It's like
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So just wanted to close out with, again, a reminder of this is what you need to look for right now if to kind of get ready for scouting for spotted lanternfly. Tree of Heaven are really easy to see right now because they have these seed masses. They are winged seed, so that's a samara or samara. And so that's the type of seed like you see on the wing, like you see on a maple seed. But this Tree of Heaven, they start out this kind of greeny yellow color, and as the seeds mature, they turn kind of a peachy color. So the ones I've seen right now are still the greeny yellow. And they have those really long pinnate leaves. And again, you can always do the smell test if you're really brave. So get familiar with Tree of Heaven. If you have some on your property, start making it a habit of going by there, you know, every couple of weeks between now and, you know, the end of the season, just to see if you're seeing any unusual insect activity on them. A few last things. Our Extension Master Gardener College a couple of weeks ago was a huge success. Appreciate everybody who helped make it such a success and who was there. We are posting the speaker resources as they're shared to us, and the slide sets you can find on NCSU Garden on the statewide site. So once you log in, you have to go up to the upper right and click on the statewide link to get to the statewide site. And it's right there posted on the front of the page is how you can get to find those slide sets that have been shared as PDF files. Also, quite a few of our speakers have shared websites and publications, and we did put those on the EMGV portal, so they are publicly available. And I will drop this link into the chat, into the chat right now, so you can see the other resources from the new public EMGV portal. Here is a save the date. Go ahead and mark your calendar for 2021. The International Master Gardener Conference will be hosted by Virginia Extension Master Gardener Program, so it'll be up in Norfolk, Virginia. I was just at the International Master Gardener Conference in Pennsylvania last week, near Philadelphia. Did not see any spotted lanternfly. I was looking, but it was wonderful. It was amazing. So really want everybody to have the opportunity to be part of International Master Gardener Conference when it's so close to home, year after next, September 12th through the 18th. 2021. And then of course the email list. So if you're not on the email list and you want to get the emails announcing these type of things, and also the follow-ups that go on these plants, pests, and pathogen webinars, be sure to subscribe. And I've also added that link to the chat. And until next time, happy gardening, and we will be back here July 23rd. We will have another speaker from North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. That'll be Dr. Bridget Lassiter, and she will be, she's a weed specialist. She'll be talking about noxious, state and federal noxious weeds found in North Carolina, things like giant hogweed. So that will be another very interesting Plants, Pests, and Pathogens webinar, and we look forward to seeing you then. And any final questions? I'm not seeing any questions coming into the chat link.
Yeah, I know questions. Either I went too quickly or confused people, or everyone was too depressed after the spotted lanternfly.
All right. Well, I am going to put on the music to play us out, and we'll hang around for a few minutes if there are any final questions that come in. Thank you all. Have a great week.